Hello friends!
Hi!
And welcome back to the home office. Today we are here to talk to you about some recent news and some updates concerning specifically international travel as we head here into 2021.
As you may have figured out, international travel is a little bit trickier nowadays, a little bit more things that we need to think about. It doesn't make it impossible though, but what we want to talk about today is just some 10 things that maybe you should be thinking about or questions you should be asking before you start planning your trip. To know if that trip is possible, and two, what you need to do to have it go swimmingly. And we're just listing 10 things today. There's a lot more things to think about just for individuals personally and for individual situations. So we definitely recommend whatever country you're looking to travel to, you go to the country's official website because they'll have everything listed out specifically, and definitely recommend using a travel agent right now because it is kind of tricky times and just better to have all your bases covered and to have somebody helping you out.
With that said, let's go ahead and get started. Our first question you should be asking yourself when you're planning to fly and travel internationally right now at this time is the border open?
You have to know that first. Can you even go there or not? Are they even allowing you to come there? So some places are, some places are not. So that's definitely the first thing you want to make sure is if that's even a possible option right now.
And it goes without saying for most of these questions, especially this one though, that things are always fluid and things are always changing. So you'll want to try to stay up to date as much as possible, especially on if the border is open.
Right.
Probably the most important thing.
Right. Thing to check first.
Now, once you've decided and figured out if the border is open, the next thing you want to ask yourself is what are the pre-travel COVID testing requirements?
Right, so most countries are requiring a COVID test to be completed before you travel, before you even get on the plane, and they will be checking this at the airport if those requirements are in place. Now, something to keep in mind is that the range of days that you have to complete the COVID test may be different for different countries. We've seen, for example, Jamaica, at the time that we traveled there, it was 10 days before travel that we needed to complete. There's other places that maybe it's 5, maybe it's 3. So you definitely want to check to see what you're working with so you can plan accordingly and get that test done in a timely manner if you do need it, which most places do need it right now.
Know if you need to get tested, know when you need to get tested, and how you need to get tested. That's another thing to keep in mind is, different countries require different testing regulations. It needs to be certified by certain laboratories or things like that. You want to make sure you have all that information before you actually go.
Because they will not let you on the plane if you do not have it. So make sure you have that test if they want it, because they won't let you come if you don't have it.
And then kind of in conjunction with that, number 3 is a travel authorization required?
Essentially what a travel authorization is, they're asking you questions. Some are things that you would be asked at custom anyways. They're just asking you ahead of time, and some of them are COVID related. Have you been exposed? Do you work in a field where exposure is more likely? Things like that to basically deem if you're allowed to come to the country or not. And you'll either be cleared or you won't be cleared, or they'll have more questions that you need to answer. A lot of countries are doing this right now, so definitely check to see what their travel authorization is and what forms you need to fill out and turn in and when they need to be submitted by.
Much like the test, you're gonna have to have it if that is required for that specific location.
If you don't have it, bye, 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 no fun.
The next thing would be to consider if travel insurance is required. Now, of course, even if it's not, you have the option.
And it's probably a good idea to do right now.
Probably a good idea. You'll want to check with the various insurance companies that you may be purchasing through. Make sure what those coverages include. Make sure there's no exclusions for like a pandemic. You'll see that a lot of times, so you want to be careful and look into what you're getting. But certain countries will actually require you to have travel insurance before you go there. For example, if you want to go to Turks and Caicos, you're required at the time of this video to have travel insurance on your own that covers certain things. Whereas the Bahamas, again at the time of this video, again check before you go, is actually requiring you to pay a fee to do those aforementioned travel authorizations, but that fee includes your travel insurance.
Right. So definitely it's very situational depending on what country you are going to. So some of these might be lumped together, some of them might be separate, but just travel insurance might be a requirement. So that's something for you to keep your eye out and see if that's something you need to purchase on your own or not.
Ooh, and a bonus item with that, some resorts, Sandals and Beaches, are including travel insurance at no additional cost to you. So you purchase your stay there and that travel insurance is covered and included. Now, you'll want to double check to make sure that that insurance happens to match that location's requirements, because that may not be the case. They're just offering you that. But keep that in mind with the different vendors that you'll be booking with. Now, if you're going there, you got the green light and you're going, the next question you need to be asking yourself, is there any kind of additional testing or quarantine required when you arrive at that location? Right.
So you probably were required to get a COVID test pre-travel. Before even getting to the airport, you needed to have that done and the paper saying, yes, I'm clear. Now, some countries, no matter what that piece of paper says, it says, no, I don't have COVID. Of course not. I'm getting on the plane. I'm coming here. I'm good. Some countries still will require you to test for COVID when you step off the plane. Or require you to have a quarantine period right when you step off the plane. So some will have you do both.
And some islands or countries, it can be conditional. If you're showing symptoms when you arrive, maybe, they'll do a temperature screening or something like that. And if you're showing symptoms, then you would be required to take an additional test. Or other places, like for example, right now, the Bahamas, if you go, you don't have to do an additional test upon arrival, other than, some extenuating circumstances like that. But if you're staying more than 4 days, on that 5th day, you'll need to be tested again on the island there. So lots of moving pieces. Again, it varies from locale to locale, but definitely something to keep in mind. And kind of segueing into that, our number 6 question, it would be, what rules is the country or the island or the destination, what are they following? What kind of ideas are they putting in place in terms of COVID-19?
Some countries are a lot more strict about wearing masks. Some countries are enforcing these rules quite heavily. You just want to be aware of those things. So once again, you know what to expect from your vacation and you know what you're going to need to do.
Now, we talked about what rules is the country or destination following. But something else, we talked about, you're flying to these locations, probably because there's only so many places you can drive to, and we're not going on a cruise right now.
Right.
So we're talking about flying. So then the next question would be, what kind of rules, regulations are the specific airlines following and putting into place?
Now, most of them are going to be pretty similar. Airlines are requiring masks to be worn during your entire flight from start to finish. Also, too, some airlines are spacing seats where they'll leave a space in the middle so you're not sitting with a stranger, just to continue the social distancing and things like that. That's really just something to keep in mind based on what you're more comfortable with.
So we've chosen our airline now, we've done all those other things, we've flown to the destination, we're mindful of the rules and regulations that are in that spot. Okay. But taking it one step further, one consideration you want to have, our next question is, are there any kind of restricted tourism zones or bubbles?
For example, when we went to Jamaica in November during COVID time, they had something called the Resilient Corridor. And what that was is the area of Jamaica that tourism was allowed to take place. Travelers were allowed to go to and shop and eat at restaurants and things like that. Anything outside of the corridor was not allowed, was off limits for travelers.
Without a quarantine.
Just so you know what is available to you, what parts of the country are you even allowed to go in? Does your resort have a bubble to where you're not allowed to leave the resort?
Or if you are allowed to leave your resort, what are the limits and areas that you can go to? If you're going to a place like Sandals and a destination that has multiple resorts in a certain area, normally you can transverse between those freely. Is that going to be permissible at that time? Just something to consider and check into. Certain excursions are only being allowed because they've been authorized to operate safely in these times, or they've made concessions and considerations to be able to operate in the necessary means. If your idea was to go to your specific island or country or locale and then do a free roaming explore, now is probably not the best time for that based on the regulations for most areas.
Right.
But if you want to just go, stay in your bubble, and enjoy yourself, have a great time, you can definitely do that in a lot of locations. Now, here's the big one that kind of brought us to all of this.
And a new one.
And a new one. So if you're unfamiliar, the CDC recently announced, Center for Disease Control, recently announced here in the United States that if you were inbound on a flight that was international, that you would need to have a negative COVID test that was taken within 3 days, 72 hours, prior to you arriving back in the States. Even if you're a resident or citizen, what have you, anyone coming in from an international flight. That does not pertain to U.S. territories or locations like Puerto Rico. But if you're coming from another country, you are now required to have that. There are a few minor stipulations. Other than those minor stipulations, you now need to have that test.
Right, and that's current for right now. So our next question is a COVID test required for re-entry? It is right now.
Oh, effective January 26th, 2021.
Right, and until whenever, until they decide
TBD.
Yeah, whenever they decide that that is not necessary anymore.
Hopefully not that long.
Hopefully
for all of this
long.
stuff, right?
So, but that is something to check to see if during the time of your travel, is that still going to be required? Is that still going to be necessary? Because that's a big one. You definitely want to be able to come back home. Are you going to need to take that test and get a negative result in order to get on that plane back home?
Because you will be denied boarding otherwise. Period, point blank, end of discussion. Goodbye, the end. We know what you might be thinking. Egads!
Egads.
I don't know if that's such a good situation. How am I going to figure out where to take this test, how to go do it, all that stuff. The good news is a lot of vendors, a lot of suppliers of tours, travel, resorts, what have you, they're aware of this. And that's kind of our last question. Well, not kind of, it is.
Does your resort offer complimentary COVID re-entry testing?
So, you know, we love Sandals/Beaches. Those are definitely our preferred vendors for all-inclusive resorts, and of course located all throughout the Caribbean. So that's kind of what we've been discussing with clients the most here. Currently, until the end of March, I believe.
Yep.
And TBD if that gets extended, Sandals/Beaches is offering on-site rapid testing at your resort free of charge.
Free of charge. Which that is huge. That is such, to me, that is such a relief. One, that we don't have to leave and go find some place to get a COVID test, to where we could be getting exposed by more people anyways. We don't have to leave the resort and kind of waste more fun time, and it's included. We don't have to pay for it. So that is a very big deal, and that's a very important thing to think about, especially when you're choosing your resort.
While we love Sandals and Beaches and think that they are definitely leading the charge in how to approach this situation, we have heard from other resorts that we work with that they're doing a very similar thing, either offering the complimentary included on-site testing, or they will have on-site testing. You might have to pay for it. So that's something to keep in mind. I think something that would definitely push us to deciding on a different properties if they had that included, just for that peace of mind and ease of access.
So we say all this, I know it sounds like a lot, like, oh my gosh, why would I travel right now and have to do all that stuff? It sounds like a lot when you're listing it out, and it is more to be cognizant of, but it's still very doable. We have done it. We're going to be doing it again, and we'll be showing you all of that when we do it. But this isn't to scare you into not traveling. This is just to inform you and have you thinking about some questions that maybe you should be thinking about and aware of, and the answers might kind of sway your decision on what kind of vacation you're going to do right now.
Yeah, and to the opposite point of not wanting to scare you, we're also obviously not encouraging willy-nilly travel. If you don't feel safe traveling at this time, by all means, don't do it. But as Chels mentioned, we have already traveled under these conditions. We are going to travel again very, very soon internationally under these conditions. And so we want to show you that yes, you can go and have fun. You can still do it with these requirements, but you can do it safely.
And I think one of the most important things about being safe right now is being informed. And that's why we wanted to talk about these questions that you should be asking yourself, because knowing what you need to do, which not only makes you prepared, but also gives you peace of mind.
So with that said, we hope you've enjoyed today's video. We hope you found it helpful. Some things to keep in mind as you approach international travel, at least in the not too distant future. Fingers crossed we're not talking about any of this much longer.
Cross your fingers, cross your toes, cross everything that will get through this, because we will.
Now, if you're still interested in trying to book your own travel at this time, of course, we are travel agents and our services are always complimentary to you. Maybe you'd like to go to Sandals just like we did, or hey, take the whole family to Beaches, Sandals Family All-Inclusive Resort, like we might be doing. What?
What?
Who said that?
I didn't.
Okay. We would love to help make that happen for you, so please feel free to reach out via the travel agent information that you can find in the description of this video. We look forward to seeing you next time. Stay safe, enjoy yourselves, have a positive attitude. We'll sign off as we always do.
Happy travel!